Hey guitar fanatics, I'm going to tell you something that might seem counterintuitive to a lot of you. I see a lot of students learning scales way too early in their development, and it causes a big problem. They're just memorizing scale shapes without knowing how music really works. And without understanding chords and other fundamentals, those scale shapes, they're just empty patterns. When these players try to solo, it often turns into noodling that just sounds like scale practice. So here's the game changer. Learn triads first. Mastering triads first not only unlocks chords and helps you become a better rhythm player, but it makes soloing so much easier. And not just with chord tones, but knowing which other notes from a scale to choose for maximum impact and emotion. In this video, I'll show you not only how to practice triads, but also how to use them to start soloing over chord progressions, and how to mix in other notes from the major scale to start coming up with great sounding licks. Grab your guitar and get ready. Here we go. So let me clarify something right away. I said in the title, forget scales. Now we can't actually do that because every chord we play, every arpeggio we play, heck, every note we play comes from some scale. But just memorizing some finger patterns doesn't mean that you know a scale. To really know a scale, you need to know the triads that you can make with that scale. You need to know the seventh chords that you can make with that scale. And you need to know how each interval in the scale relates to those triads and seventh chords. Learning triads, which are 3-note chords that we get by stacking every other note in a scale, it helps us to understand and play the most important notes of a chord. The root, or the note that gives a triad its name, the third note that we come to from the root, and the fifth note that we come to from the root. Knowing how to find the root, the third, and the fifth in turn allows us to easily get familiar with the other notes of a scale and how they sound. If we can find the root and the third, well, it's pretty easy to find the second. If we can find the third and the fifth, it's pretty easy to find the fourth and the sixth. And the seventh is always going to be a note just below the root. Now, a few theory aspects to get your head around. The major scale has 7 notes. Those notes are separated by a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and another half step back to the root. So the intervals, they're not all symmetrical. Because of that, the triads in a key aren't going to be symmetrical either. Now, we can make a triad off each note from the scale, and each major scale has 3 types of triads. We have major triads with the root, a major third, and a note a fifth above the root. We can have a minor triad with a root, a minor third, and the fifth. Or there's the diminished triad, which is the root, a minor third, and the flat fifth, which is also a minor third above that middle note. Let's look at the triads in the key of G major because that's the key of our backing track today. In the key of G, we've got the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and we're back to G. The triad built off G is G major with the notes G, B, and D. The triad built off of A in the key of G is A minor with the notes A, C, and E. Off of the B note, we're going to get B minor with the notes B, D, and F sharp. Off of C, we get C major with the notes C, E, and G. Off of D, we get D major with the notes D, F sharp, and A. Off of E, we're going to get E minor with the notes E, G, and B. And off of F sharp, we're going to get F sharp diminished with the notes F sharp, A, and C. So in every major key, we get triads in this order: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished. And we're back to our root. So we just played triads with roots on the D string, and those shapes cover 3 strings. So practice step number 1 is to play these 3 string shapes starting on each set of 3 strings. Let's go down to the low E string. Here's G major. Here's A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. That brings us back to G. Now let's go to the A string. The shapes that start on the A string, they're going to be identical to the shapes that started on the low E. At the 10th fret, we've got a G note. So here's G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G major. We've already played our shapes with the root on the D string, and they're a little different because of how the B string is tuned. Starting on the G string, the shapes are a little different yet because now the B string is the middle note in the shape. We're going to go up to the G at the 12th fret of the G string. Here's G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor. Here is F sharp diminished, and we're back to G. Now there are many, many different triad shapes that we could play. For this video, I want to stick with these 3-string shapes. Now memorizing shapes is one thing, but to really ingrain this stuff, I want you using it musically as soon as possible. So our next practice exercise, we're going to play along with a backing track. Now our track is in G. We've got the chords G, D, E minor, and C. And each chord only gets 2 beats, so it's going to be changing kind of fast. And here's the practice task. We're going to play the triad that matches the chord as the chords change. To make things easy at first, let's use shapes that all start on the same string, like those shapes that started on the D string. I'm going to demonstrate this over the backing track, and I am going to ask you as the chords cycle through each time to try to play triads that start on a different string. So the first time through, I'm going to play the triads that start on the D string, G, D, E minor, and C. Second time through, we're going to play triads that start on the G string, which were G, D, E minor, and C. Give this a try with me. Here we go. Now here's a variation of the drill that we just did. We're going to play over the track again, but instead of playing shapes on the same string, I'm going to ask you each time the chord changes to play a triad that starts on a different string. And that might sound something like this. We played the G starting on the low E, D starting on the 5th string, E minor starting on the 4th, and C starting on the G string. This is a lot more challenging because now we're having to recall different shapes and remember where they were on the fly. Let's give it a try. Okay, our last variation of this drill, and this one's going to get you playing all over the neck. We're going to play 2 different triad shapes for each chord. For instance, over G, I could play the shapes that start on the low E and then the D string. For the D, we could play a shape that starts on the A string and then the G string. This is more realistic to how we actually use triads to put licks together and move around the fretboard. I'll give it a try over our backing track. We're moving all around the neck now. We're playing multiple triad shapes to match our chord progression. We're doing it in time with a backing track. In other words, we're making music. Yes, it's still a practice drill, but it's musical practice. I want you using things you're practicing in a musical way as soon as possible. I promise you won't believe how this accelerates your learning and really makes this stuff part of your musical DNA. So what's next? We're going to learn something that really opens up the guitar neck. We're going to play triad inversions, which just means we're going to play the notes in a different order. We've started all of our triads on the root so far, and we've played the root, the third, and the fifth. But we can also start on the third and play the fifth and the root. We call that the first inversion. Check out these shapes with our starting notes on the D string. Our G root form, we had the notes G, B, and D. If we go up to the 7th position, we've got B at the 9th fret, D at the 7th fret, and G at the 8th fret. The D root form, we had the notes D, F sharp, and A. If we go to the 14th position, we've got the first inversion with the notes F sharp at the 16th fret, A at the 14th fret of the G string, and D at the 15th fret of the B string. The E minor root form, we had the notes E, G, and B. We move that up to the 15th position. We've got our first inversion with the G at the 17th fret, B at the 16th fret of the G string, and the E at the 17th fret of the B string. Lastly, our root C form had the notes C, E, and G. We're going to go up to the 12th position. We've got the first inversion with the E at fret 14 of the D string, G at fret 12, and C at fret 13 of the B string. Now that we've got the root form and the first inversion of each triad in our chord progression, let's play them over the backing track. Root form and first inversion over each chord. Let's give it a go. Now we're going to play an inversion that starts on the 5th, and we're going to play the 5th, the root, and the 3rd, and we call this the second inversion. The major shapes on the D, G, and B string are pretty easy to memorize. They're all on the same fret. For G, the notes are at the 12th fret of the D, G, and B strings, or the open strings. For D, we'd be at the 7th or 19th fret. For C, we'd be at the 5th or the 17th fret. In the E minor shape, it's just a little different. We'd have the notes on the D and G strings at the 9th fret and the note on the B string at the 8th. Or we could go up to the 21st and the 20th fret. Let's also look at inversions on the G, B, and E strings. The G first inversion, we're going to start with the B note, and we have this shape at the 3rd or 15th position. So I'm at the B note at the 4th fret, and the notes on the B and E string are on the same fret. For D, we'd start at the F sharp at the 10th position. So we've got the 11th fret and the 10th on the B and E. E minor, we'd start at the G string, the G at the 12th fret, and all the notes are right there at the 12th fret, or the open string. The C, we're going to start with the E note at the 9th fret of the G string, and then we've got G and C at the 8th fret of the B and E strings. For second inversion, we'd have G at the 7th position with D, G, and B. Move that shape to the 14th position for D with A, D sharp, and F sharp. For E minor, we'd go up to the 15th position. We've got B, E, and G. C, we'd be at the 12th fret with G, C, and E. Now our next practice exercise doesn't involve playing over a track, but it's a super important exercise. We're going to play first on the D, G, and B strings. And what I want you to do is go through the chords of our backing track, which were G, D, E minor, and C. And we're going to play all the way up the neck. We're going to play every inversion of each of those 4 chords that we can play on those strings. Here's G, starting with the second inversion on the open strings and going all the way up the neck. Here's D, starting with first inversion. E minor, starting with a root form. And lastly, C with a first inversion down in the open position. Now, let's do that same thing on the G, B, and high E strings. Here's G, starting with the first inversion at the 3rd fret. Here's D. E minor, starting with our open strings. And lastly, here's C. Now that's a lot of shapes. And the first step is to obviously memorize those shapes. The second step is to be able to play through the shapes smoothly, going from inversion to inversion all the way up and down the neck. And that leads us to another practice drill that we are going to play over our track. And it's going to help us organize in our minds where these different shapes are in relation to one another up and down the fretboard. Let's see how efficient we can be playing through the chords of this progression by using different inversions. So down around the 3rd position in the D, G, and B strings, we've got the G root form, the D first inversion, E minor first inversion, and C the second inversion. If we jump up to the 7th position, we've got G first inversion, D second inversion, E minor second inversion, and the C root form. Take it up to the 12th position, we've got the G second inversion, the D root form, E minor root form, and the C first inversion. Let's play through those 3 positions over the backing track, just playing 1 triad per chord, but we're going to take it all the way up the neck. Here we go. Okay, I promised to show you how you can mix in other notes from the scale to make licks out of triads. Here's a really simple idea that sounds great. Let's take second inversion shapes on the G, B, and E strings. And all we're going to do is play the next note in the scale after the note on the G string. So here we are with G. We're starting on a B note, then I play a C. Then we play the note of the triad on the B string. We play the note of the triad that sits on the G string. We play the next note in the scale above that and slide up one more note, which gives us the starting note for the next triad inversion. So I'm playing B, C, D, G, A, and B over that G triad. Drop down to D at the 10th position. We're going to play F sharp, G, A, and then D, E, and F sharp. For E minor, we're going to start on a G note here at the 12th position. We're going to play G and A on the G string, B on the B string, then E, F sharp, and G on the high E. And then for C, we're going to drop down. We're going to play the E note, F sharp on the G string, G on the B string, and then C, D, and E on the high E. Each of these little patterns are so melodic, and we nail the chord changes. Let me play these over the backing track so you can hear how nice this sounds. Okay, so I threw a lot at you. For all of our exercises, ultimately we want to be able to play these on any string set. We didn't demonstrate this because I didn't want the video to be 2 hours long. I hope you're seeing how much of the neck that you can cover with triads and how easy it is to use them to solo through chord changes. As I mentioned earlier, this is great for your rhythm playing also. Okay, folks, work hard on this stuff, get it down cold, have fun playing your guitar. I'll see you soon.